Here in this video lecture, we're going to look at an article by Edwin Hartman called The Commons and the Moral Organization. In this, Hartman is going to argue that a business is like a commons, and in that way, a certain kind of communal culture and standards and regulations need to be implemented to ensure that the commons is preserved. Now, we had to start with the tragedy of the commons. We had to start with understanding what exactly it is that requires regulation in a commons. And basically, the tragedy of the commons is that if everybody, let's say there's like a field, right, where herdsmen can have their cattle graze it, and if there are no rules, if everybody is left completely free to do as they please in the commons, it will lead to ruin. The reason is that it's in everyone's self-interest to introduce more cattle to the commons, because more cattle they make more money. The problem is that since that's in everyone's self-interest and that's what they do, there begins overgrazing, then undermining the ability for anyone to graze at all and make money. So what happens is the commons end up being, historically enclosed, and there are all sorts of rational arguments now for why there are certain regulations, that have to be put in place to preserve the commons, because otherwise it's actually destroyed by free, rational activity. So the argument is that without any kind of regulation then in a commons, everybody suffers by the destruction of public goods. Now, Hartman says that a business is actually the same kind of thing as a commons, where one can graze and people benefit from this grazing, right? Pursuing their own goals and interests and desires. Now, he gives 4 reasons why an organization is a commons. The first reason is that employees and management, whatever their distinct interests are, they all share an interest in the organization's prosperity. So, of course, if the organization does well, then employees can keep their jobs. Maybe they can get a raise. Maybe they can move up in the company and fulfill, certain career desires, or again, get a raise in pay. Same thing with management and making more money and having sustainability and some sense of job security. The second reason is that an organization is a commons is that because of the first argument, that employees and management share this interest of prosperity in the business, this results in organizational effectiveness, serving the interests of employees and managers, that then both of them end up working together to figure out, okay, how is it that we can best ensure that prosperity results from the existence of this business or this organization. Now, the second reason is a function of then employees and managers' cooperative effort. So already then, unlike a commons in a free sense, unlike the historical commons, now in a business we recognize that there is some kind of effort that they have to think about each other and what are not only the benefits of myself as a single employee, or maybe I don't care about some complaints people are making about the business that can improve the business, because whatever, that requires extra work. I'm not getting paid any more money to try to resolve these issues that customers are complaining about, whatever. I'm just going to keep taking my paychecks. Of course, yeah, okay, that's true if you're just the one person, right? And then you want to go and spend extra time, or maybe someone else who's paid more might, need to take care of that as opposed to you. But there's a way in which if everybody recognizes, hey, we can work together actually then through kind of mutual support to preserve then the effectiveness of the business, then that means they're all, unlike in a free commons, they're all now working in a kind of regulated common space. The fourth reason is that it's possible to get a free ride by contributing less than one's share of the fruits of others' cooperative works. Right, we know this happens in the case of, again, the commons, where the herdsman can add more cattle to the commons, which ends up hurting everyone else while they make more money. And even though everyone might know, hey, we shouldn't add more cattle to the commons, but if everyone doesn't add more cattle to the commons, then that means there's more room for you to add cattle to the commons, right? So in this way, we know that for an individual, it's rational then to go against what is in everyone's best interest and introduce more cattle to the commons to make more money for yourself. The same thing exists in a business where, again, on the job, it's possible to do a little bit less work than everyone else, where the company might still survive or other people might pick up the slack. So then you can actually get away with doing less work and making still, hopefully good pay. So all these cases are the same kinds of things that occur in a commons. So therefore, an organization or a business is a commons. Now, if a business is a commons, that means it requires a culture. It requires some practices, some habits that are kind of instilled in what it means to be a member of that business, a worker in that business. In the same way that there might be a certain culture, like often is talked about in democratic societies. So there's a certain culture that has to exist, that people respect the right to vote, or they respect private property, or whatever else, right? That ensures the system can function. In business, this is often referred to as a corporate culture. Now, culture is communicated through socialization that includes perhaps peer pressure, rituals, symbols, and even stories, such that people take on a certain idea of. Oftentimes, if you join a company, they'll say, "This is, the motto of the company," or "This is the mission statement of the company." Some story that tells why the company exists, what their goals are, what their ideals are, other things like that, right? Where they want to try and hire workers that identify with the culture of that business, that identify with the goals or ideals. And in that way, this is communicated through maybe rituals, maybe certain fundraising drives or other things that a company might do to help facilitate the existence and perpetuation of that culture. So a strong culture then in business can increase the probability that employees end up contributing to the organization and ultimately, of course, then eventually to themselves with the perpetuation of the organization, with the security of their job in that business. So what businesses then want, if they see themselves as a commons, is just like how commons or certain conceptions of the commons exist in the United States, whereby now it's understood that certain people have responsibility of taking care of certain plots of land to ensure that there's not erosion of the soil or other things like that. You want cultures again to exist in business, so employees won't just feel like they can say, screw this job, whatever, I don't care about it. But they identify, it can be proud of working in the company, and that they adopt the values of the company. And so it serves the interests of preserving the company, and then ultimately, hopefully then serves the interests of the workers themselves, as well as, management as well, the bosses and so on. So to create a culture, a corporate culture then, there's this theory put forward by Harry Frankfurt about first and second order desires. First order desires are immediate desires, things like, I want to, drink some of this soda water. Or, the example Hartman gives is smoking a cigarette. Now, first order desires are typically, although not always, influenced by second order desires. These are background desires, stronger desires that are more fundamental to one's character. So perhaps, I really care about remaining hydrated, right? And trying to maintain my health. And through that, I have created a desire for soda water. I really enjoy the taste of just plain soda water instead of drinking, Cokes or other things like that. And in that way, through that desire, right, the first order desire of drinking, wanting a soda water right now, I also then fulfill my second order desire of wanting to remain hydrated. Now, of course, there are times when they can conflict, though, right? So perhaps I um, we'll use the second order desire of wanting to remain healthy, right? And let's say I'm hanging out with friends and I'm maybe at a bar drinking or something like that, and they want to go out for a smoke break, and I have this kind of desire, the first order desire, right, to go and smoke with them. That might end up conflicting then with my second order desire of wanting to remain healthy and ultimately, not wanting to smoke. Now, sometimes what can happen is then that first order desire can end up eroding away that second order desire and they can change, or the second order desire can push back against, again, right, that first order desire of wanting to smoke the cigarette. And I think, no, I really shouldn't do that. So there's ways then that in constructing a corporate culture, one can understand how then to design values in a company that try to, one, work to hire workers that identify with the second order desires of the company. And then hopefully through that, they facilitate then the emergence of first order desires that people are conscious of, that don't come into conflict then with the values of the company. So Hartman says culture at its most influential works on one's second order as well as first order desires. It makes one want whatever others and organizations want, and it may also make one want to be a certain sort of person with desires and projects of a certain kind. So a good corporate culture, then, a strong one, produces second order beliefs, second order desires, by filtering then what people observe and how they talk, by training expectations, and by influencing their interpretations of others' behavior. Right? So some cases of this might be like Title IX training, or training on like sexual harassment, where perhaps previously sexual harassment could have been more common in the workplace. And so what you do is, if the company wants to survive, it has to change the second order desires of its employees such that now they no longer, right, identify with a company that is okay with sexual harassment in the workplace or other things like that, right? It can be anything else. But the point is, you want then the desires of the workers, the employees, the managers to be the same as the desires of the company, so that they reciprocate the well-being of each other. Hartman references an Aristotelian approach to community and the creation of a corporate culture. So he says, in regard to the formation of first and second order desires, that virtue ethics, specifically Aristotelian virtue ethics, argues that a good person values and desires good things, and they desire then to desire good things. That it's a second order desire to desire good things. So the reason for this is that a truly virtuous person doesn't desire doing good things because it makes them happy. They don't desire doing good things because it improves their honor or their celebrity status. They don't go around telling everyone all the time, hey, look at these things I just did. I contributed, to charities and things like that. A truly good person, a virtuous person, they do what is right for the sake that it is right. And over time, they have learned to actually enjoy doing what is right, such that then it just becomes habitual. It becomes normal to want, in the same way that I now desire, drinking soda water, and it feels good. So in that way, it almost becomes like second nature, or maybe almost even unconscious. In the same way that occurs with the virtuous person, where they end up doing the right thing because it's becomes synonymous with basic, animal desires that human beings, can't entirely get rid of, right? And so you can adapt your desires in this way. Now, a virtuous person must, though, live in a good community. They can't simply come to desire and take, perhaps pleasure in good things for the sake of them being good. They need structure. They need structure because a good person, for example, can't really cooperate well with free riders in an unregulated commons. If you had it that resources are scarce because there's overgrazing, and so the only way one can actually survive is to maybe be deceitful or do other commit other actions of vice. That is going to take away the incentive of doing what is good, and so then the likelihood of one developing the desire to do good things. It's also going to take away the fact that being good isn't something that one can do by themselves. They need reinforcement, social reinforcement through friends, right? A virtuous person needs virtuous friends that help each other. So as Hartman says, a great polis, so, polis, the Greek term for a city, the polity, the community of citizens, or an organization with the right sort of culture, cultivates not simply virtuous behavior, as of the scribes and Pharisees, but actual virtue. Its citizens behave virtuously not because they are rewarded for so doing and punished if they do not, but because they value so doing and have second-order desires accordingly. So the good citizen, then, in a good city, in a virtuous polis, a great polis, takes pleasure in what contributes to the community and produces goods for its citizens. And that is why, then, you can construct a commons whereby there's a certain culture that people don't overgraze. Now, this doesn't mean everybody, won't overgraze. Maybe some people will still overgraze, but you can have enough people, you can be ensure that enough people won't overgraze that the commons can still exist. Now, again, this can only happen, though, if there has been cultivated in the citizens of this community a desire to actually care for their fellow citizens, right? And a desire to associate harmoniously, to live harmoniously with their fellow citizens. Now, we can think the same way about a business, in the same way in which it is good for a business in constructing a strong corporate culture to create desires in workers where the workers care about each other, right? And they can work in solidarity with one another. So a good community is one in which people are acculturated to behave morally according to the what Hartman calls the time-honored principles of autonomy, utility, and justice. That these principles are shown to exist throughout different cultures, different times, different societies, and that they are all praised and serve the interests of various communities. Now, the thing, though, is that they're not the same, though what is meant or understood by justice, what's understood by autonomy, and so on, they're not the same in every culture and every place. So this is the same in business, where perhaps in different industries, they can call forth different kinds of culture, where they can create their own unique local norms that suit their own interests and notions of success and well-being. So Aristotle's claim that politics is the culmination of morality, what this means is that the best possible principles of morality, then, are those principles that create the right kind of community, wherein they find out, okay, how is it that we can understand justice that benefits then the commons of the business, or some sense of autonomy that we can give workers that also serves the interests of the business, right? And in Western liberal societies, the same thing has been done with the commons, whereby it's not the case that freedom has been entirely done away with when the commons was enclosed, but there was a certain trade-off where it was, okay, to what extent can we, what's the most we can respect autonomy while also preserving the commons, right? And you try to have that kind of balance. And because industries are different and they require different things from workers, they make different products, they have different customer bases, and so on, you can have those different kinds of principles that would structure a corporate culture, reflect then the local notions of success and well-being of those communities. How then that corporate culture is constructed means that you first actually investigate what are the best possible principles of morality. So one would not then think that a community is good because people act according to those best principles, but they then figure out what are those best principles, and now let's create the structure that allows those principles to flourish. I mean, this is an idea that comes from Plato's Republic, for example, right? The idea is you want to know what in the good city, what kind of virtues would you want, for example, to exist. In the Republic, they argue that justice is the virtue that ensures the flourishing of the other virtues. And so you want to construct a constitution which allows justice to exist because it serves as the kind of safeguard and facilitator of the other virtues. So you proceed from then what is the good, what are the principles we want, what kind of an organization or structure then can we create to actually enact those principles. So for an ethical manager then, the task is to create a culture that encourages commons preserving and otherwise appropriate behavior and dispositions. Finally, we can look at some qualities of a good community. We can look at certain qualities that we would find in good businesses, in good and strong corporate cultures. So a good community provides exit, voice, and loyalty. By exit is meant the ability to leave one's community, whereby a worker isn't, of course, tied to a specific job, but they can look at perhaps what's the pay at the different jobs, what are the different values at the different companies I'm thinking about working at, what are the benefits, and so on, right? Or maybe over time a worker doesn't like the business practices, they think they're unjust. Well, they might be able to then leave that business, right? So a good corporate culture has exit, the ability for people to leave that community. The second thing is voice, the ability to incorporate perspectives to, of course, hopefully better the community, whereby people can voice their concerns, right? Where they can say, hey, I think this business practice would be better. Or, hey, here's something that's a problem that's actually hurting business, right? In this way, you kind of have a democratic process that exists in a business setting, and in that way, of course, you can try and respect people's autonomy. The last thing is loyalty. What a good community has is loyalty, where members of a community have a certain feeling of being bound to one another in a way that goes beyond self-interest, where they have solidarity with each other. That's, of course, one of the most important things, because that's how you overcome the tragedy of the commons, where people don't just do what is good because they don't just do what's good because it's in their own self-interest. Because if that's the case, well, sometimes your self-interest might change, like in the case of the tragedy of the commons. In that way, then, what people do becomes contingent on other variables, and it's not a reliable way to ensure the well-being of the community or of the business organization. So corporate cultures then should affect people's higher order desires and even their interest to make loyalty self-supporting. So businesses should look then at other models of commons and how then commons have overcome the problem of the tragedy of the commons in ways in which then they can preserve democratically their existence as an organization and ensure the flourishing of themselves and the promotion of their own well-being.